Money FM 89.3, the best of Saturday mornings. International News Review.
We are back with the International News Review. Steve Oken joining us, and we are starting with the U.S. Ambassador Designate to Singapore, and what a kerfuffle that was this week, Steve. Wow. Take us through what Anjani Sinha said during his confirmation speech and the fallout afterward.
Right. Train wreck, kerfuffle, clown show, whatever words you want to use. And it was really surprising that this happened. Look, in my government days, I worked on 3 confirmation hearings, prepping the nominees. And these follow a very set pattern, especially one like this, which is a relatively easy confirmation hearing. So you do your homework. You know what are the key issues. You have prep sessions where you literally have, and I've played senators in these prep sessions, asking the questions that are going to come.
Mock Q&A
exactly.
kind of scenario.
You have the mock hearing. You then know, because you go to the offices of the senators who are going to be judging you, because this is a confirmation hearing. They're judging you. You ask them, what are your issues? What is it that you're going to ask? No one wants to have gotchas here, right? I mean, the point of the hearing is to get the real issue out. And so you expect these to be following a pretty set format. It's not like Pete Hegseth. That is an entirely different situation. And what makes this one really easy is that there are 5 people at this hearing, and you've only got about an hour and a half at the most. You're getting maybe 1 or 2 sets of questions. It is not a grilling like, Hegseth went through for hours and hours and hours. So I get ready, my editor at a website says, do you want to write something on this hearing for tomorrow? And I said, no, there's not going to be anything to write. it's scripted. You know what's going to happen. It's preordained. And then, I wake up in the morning, very early for me, which I always do, and I look at my phone, 55 WhatsApp messages. And I'm like, what happened? And what happened was he couldn't answer questions that he should have been able to answer. We can get into why we think that happened, but it was just a terrible performance on his part, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. Now, and also, does it really matter? That's another thing we could talk about, too.
We'll get to that, but let's get the context. So Dr. Anjani Sinha, this is where you played detective famously. You went viral. Give the context to our listeners who he is first and what his relationship to Trump probably is.
Look, there used to be a handful of ambassadorships, and on Donald Trump, it is way more than a handful. But there are a handful of postings that, look, quite frankly, go to big donors. In Asia, there really used to only be 1 or 2 of these, and Singapore is one of those 2. You would always have career foreign service officers who are the best of the best to be your ambassadors in other posts. Japan would get a political, but it would always be somebody with a huge stature, like a former vice president, right? A former Senate majority leader, somebody who really had that stature. China gets to be a little bit different. We can put that one off to the side. But Singapore would get a big donor typically. And, it makes sense a bit for Singapore, because one of the strong relationship between the U.S. and Singapore, regardless of who has the post, as we saw from our last ambassador, and because it is a business hub. You want somebody who is familiar with business. So we typically hear it really goes back about the last 30, 40 years, we get political ambassadors. He is a political ambassador. He has no diplomatic experience. He seems to have very little business experience because he's a doctor, but he's close to the president. He wrote a couple of checks to the president. That's why he got nominated. Also because he's close to the Trump family.
But let's get into it. Senator Tammy Duckworth, full disclosure who she is. She lived in ASEAN. She grew up here. She went to the Singapore American School for a while. She knows the region.
Senator from Illinois. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, he has to slip that in. His home state, I believe.
It is my home state.
And she did a fantastic job. She basically showed that he wasn't prepared.
And a war veteran, a double amputee helicopter pilot.
Extraordinary woman.
From Iraq War.
Extraordinary woman. Double amputee, as Glenn mentioned. She tore him apart, right? A couple of things. Does it make any difference? Does he still get the nomination? Does he still become U.S. ambassador to Singapore? And what does it say more broadly about his lack of prep for this country?
Well, this is the issue, because if I'm prepping him, I know I'm going to go through that Senate committee and I'm going to say, who's the one who's going to be toughest for me? Because when I worked on multiple hearings, not just confirmation hearings, but any hearings, you know who's going to be coming after you, either because, look, they're on the other side of the aisle. So if I'm a Democrat, they're a Republican, or if I'm a Republican, they're a Democrat. So you look, if you're a Republican, you know they're giving you all softballs in this era for this position. What Democrat is there who really knows this area? And I am going to really prep for that person. I'm going to be in their office asking them what they're going to ask. I'm going to read everything they write. I'm going to read every question they ask at any hearing and be prepared. And she was the one who you had to have your eye on if you are him and his team. And she asked pretty basic questions. What is the trade surplus the United States has with Singapore? What is the relationship between the U.S. Navy and the Singapore Navy? And he could not answer them. He either answered them wildly incorrectly or gave very vague answers. And it has to be because of one of two things. He wasn't prepped, or he was prepped and he froze. And I will just say, look, this guy is, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, he's a complete novice. He is a complete amateur. He doesn't know anything about
That's
Washington,
not a positive
D.C.
way.
Well, I was going to say, if that's not negative, I'm not really sure what is.
You didn't let me finish. He's a complete negative and amateur when it comes to Washington, D.C., when it comes to the absolute big leagues of politics. And you get in that Senate hearing room, and the senators are all up above you on a dais, and you're at this little table by yourself, and you got the lights on you, and you got the cameras there, and you got people coming at you all over the place, and you don't know what's coming next. You can freeze. Even if you're good, it's intimidating.
I'll be playing a violin in a minute. Are we supposed to feel sorry for this guy?
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, I thought her questioning on when does Singapore have the ASEAN chairmanship was not entirely fair. It's 2 years hence from now. He knew that Malaysia currently holds the chairmanship. That's the kind of question that as he comes in and gets in the building, if you will, at the embassy, he will get across all of those details. So that's the first thing.
Okay, wait, stop, because I'm going to completely disagree with you here. No, I like explain why, and then you come to the second point.
All right.
Okay, if Singapore was the ASEAN chair in 2030, okay, yeah, then it's an unfair question. They are going to be ASEAN chair when he is here.
Sure.
The prep starts for that now.
Sure.
There are going to be so many meetings.
Absolutely.
You need to know that. If you are going to be in post,
Steve,
and it's going to be the first things you start working
the
on,
veins on your neck
know.
are throwing out. Now, look.
You need to know.
I totally agree. It is important that these guys know these things. But once they get in the door, they have a wonderful deputy chief of mission and staff here that gets them up to speed. It's 2 years hence that Singapore is going to have this role. He will have plenty of time to settle in and understand that dynamic. I agree. It's totally important.
What's your second point?
The other point was she was asking him questions about, the tariffs, right? That Trump is putting on. And she said something like, do you agree with the tariffs? Should there be tariffs? Things like that. And he really waffled that answer badly. And the simple answer was, I will follow President Trump's directive. If he wants tariffs in a given country, it is my job as the ambassador to explain that to the Singapore government. He tried to, he just had a non-answer. So I think that's where he failed badly by not just saying, hey, I serve at the pleasure of the president. I am here to underscore his policies. It's not about his own personal opinion.
I agree he gave a terrible answer. I would have prepped it differently. I would have said, this is coming, right? The United States has a free trade agreement with Singapore. The United States is committed to free trade with Singapore. The United States has put a 10% tariff on Singapore that goes against everything the United States should be doing with Singapore. You have to be prepared for that question. Now, the answer, I agree, the obvious answer is Senator, if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed, I will certainly work with you, and I will work with the Singapore government, and I will work with the United States government as we implement United States policy.
Yep. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
He was just completely either unprepared or froze. It's one of the two.
Let's move on.
Fuji Ren asked a question that I was going to ask. Several prominent people in Singapore, I'm not naming them, but they're diplomats or former MPs, have followed the usual line, it doesn't really matter. As long as Dr. Anjani has a hotline to Trump, it doesn't really matter. I personally feel that's a very simplistic analysis because it also does a disservice to the many, many diplomats in Singapore of all kinds of high commissions and ambassadorships who work tremendously hard. Isn't it too simplistic to say, if you got the hotline to Trump, that's all that matters?
It depends on the country. And Singapore is really unique in this regard because literally you could put somebody who doesn't understand anything about anything, and you're still going to have a strong U.S.-Singapore relationship. And that is because of, as Glenn mentioned, the professionals who come here, the career foreign service officials, the career foreign commercial officers who come to Singapore from the United States government are really good. The Singapore government has some of the best diplomats in the world. The Singapore government has government-to-government relationships with the United States that no other country has, certainly of its size.
It's the A team.
On both sides.
On both sides.
And that's why it works. Now, if there's no ambassador here for 3 years, you're still going to have a very strong and effective relationship. This doesn't say anything because we are one of the few countries in the world that does political ambassadors.
But then what's the logic? You could have a cabbage as ambassador, and you're saying it wouldn't make any difference to the relationship between the U.S. and Singapore.
It wouldn't hurt on the downside. There can be upsides that you are going to miss. You have an opportunity cost, but it is very different than other governments. And so if he is here and he can make the case to the president of the United States, who frankly is the one decision maker that we have, unlike any other president, he's the most powerful president we've had in our lifetimes. You can get to him. That is something very few people can do, and no one career official could do that here.
Now, what tickled me this week was for about a day or so, Malaysians were like, ha, 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 look who Singapore's got, look who Singapore's got. And I could almost see Trump saying, hold my beer from Hooters. Tell us about Donald Trump's nomination, Nick Adams, his bid for U.S. ambassador to Malaysia. Tell us who Nick Adams is.
Well, let's put it in context and say why Malaysia is different than Singapore and why this one really does matter. Right? Malaysia does not have the relationship with the United States that Singapore has. There is a very tricky relationship between Malaysia and the United States, in part because of Malaysia's relationship with China, in part because of Malaysia being not pro-Palestinian, because that is one thing. Malaysia has been pro-Hamas. That is very different. And so you have a tricky relationship there that you have to get right if you are the United States. And forever, unlike Singapore, where we have had political after political after political posted here, there have only been career ambassadors in Malaysia. You only send those who are really
the career foreign service.
The career foreign service people who've been in the State Department typically for decades before you can get a post like ambassador to Malaysia. And now he picks somebody that is straight out of Fox News and the MAGAverse, and it is going to be a real problem when you have a government that you have to have a very delicate balancing act with. And this guy is just a alpha king. And you're going to put an alpha king in Muslim majority Malaysia? This is going to be a real problem. It's
not just that. He was pretty much a failed liberal politician in Australia. For context, he is actually Australian. He's now an American citizen, so he's an Australian American. He hasn't even been in the US that long. I think about a decade or so.
No, less than that. He was naturalized in 2021 or 2022.
Right, but he lived there before that.
He came to the U.S. in 2017 because I'm quoting him, "I love guns, hot dogs, chicken fried steak, barbecue, cheerleaders, American football, beauty pageants, muscle cars, and 16-lane freeways with supersized American flags." That is his impression of the United States of America.
Which may play to MAGA's base. Yes, he's got a history of misogyny. But more importantly, Steve, his online history includes quite a lot of Islamophobic comments. How is that going to play in Malaysia?
There clearly was no thought given to this whatsoever. And quite in terms of geopolitics, quite similar. You could say, look, why did President Trump pick Sinha to be ambassador here? Well, because they have a family relationship. He plays golf with him, and as Bill Ahari put in his Facebook page, he's Don Jr.'s orthopedic doctor. So why did he pick this guy to be Malaysia? He picked him because he likes Trump, because he thinks Trump is literally the greatest human being alive. And that is why he picked him. And so it is going to have a geopolitical fault. And look, we're at a very delicate time because ASEAN is waking up to the fact, the 10 members of ASEAN are waking up to the fact that if you want to deal with the United States, Trump is going to pick you off one by one, and you better work collectively. And it is going to be a real problem.
Okay, lots of questions from Kelly, Aloysius, Ian, Fujiren, and James. We've never had so many questions about the International News Review. So to paraphrase most of them, will they still go through? I know it's supposed to be a confirmation hearing in all but name, but is there a chance that they may swap them out at this late stage? Or is it a done deal for both of them, Singapore and Malaysia?
Looking at Trump's track record and his power over the Senate, it's a done deal.
That's extraordinary.
Okay, there we go.
That is genuinely extraordinary.
Let's move on. The U.S., surprisingly, has resumed military supplies to Ukraine after Trump had very clearly said he was not interested in supplying them anymore. His relationship with Putin has failed miserably over these last couple of months. And so now the U.S. will be sending Patriot missiles and other anti-missile defense systems to Ukraine. How do you explain this one, Steve? Because it is a massive about-face for the Trump administration.
It's easy to explain because, as I always say with Donald Trump, just listen to what he says and believe him, and then you can figure out what he's going to do. And Donald Trump said he had a phone call with Putin and that he was, quote unquote, not happy with Putin because Putin's, quote unquote, very nice attitude turned out to be meaningless. Hello.
Like as everyone had said to him for, months and months.
As anybody who's followed Putin for the last couple decades realizes that his very nice attitude he is not a nice person. Yeah. And so how Donald Trump came to this realization now, I have no idea. Why the bombing of Ukraine and the killing of civilians now is different than it has been in the past, I don't know, but this time it's different. So now Donald Trump is going to sell the United States, with Donald Trump's approval, is going to sell Patriot missiles to NATO countries. NATO countries are then going to sell those Patriot missiles to Ukraine, and then the United States is going to make money off it, which we have been doing from the beginning.
Well, Ukraine was hit by a record 728 drones on Tuesday alone. That's going to increase, according to Zelensky. But as you mentioned, why now? I mean, this is nothing new. Putin has never agreed to any kind of ceasefire. We know what his demands are. We know what he wants. Why now?
You literally ask Donald Trump why now. Why is it that this barrage is different than previous barrages? And we heard, very tellingly from the Secretary of State Rubio, met with Foreign Minister Lavrov in KL this week, and the meeting was described as being having a frank discussion. You don't get much stronger diplomatic language than when you have a frank discussion. So it must have been a pretty rough one up there in KL. And so now we're selling Patriot missiles to the Ukrainians, we Americans, and it's about time. We should have been doing this a long time ago.
It'll be interesting to see, the war there has dragged on now several years, and we're getting ready for the fall to come. Another winter is, not going to be too far away from us. So it will be interesting to see what, if anything, the peace talks, whatever those were or supposed to be, seem to be going nowhere. So are we in for another brutal winter with this war going into a fourth year? What do you think we'll see, Steve? Will there be any now that Trump realizes you can't trust Putin to do what he says he's going to do, where do we go from here?
Well, here's the question. Can you trust Trump to do what he said he's going to do? Is Trump going to allow these missiles to keep going, or is he going to then change his mind again? I mean, it is just, there's so much uncertainty on what the Americans are going to do, that will Putin be intimidated by this? Will this cause Putin to change tack? And, Glenn, as you mentioned, the winter's coming up, so the ground war will slow down, but that doesn't mean the missile wars are going to slow down. And, we saw the Ukrainians have a great a great victory on Russian territory when they blew up all of those launchers. But it was a massive win, but it was only about a third. So unfortunately, we never thought we'd still be talking about this when we first started talking about it years ago. And I hope we're not, but we may be talking about it next year.
We'll get Katerina Zelenko, the Ukrainian ambassador, back on the show, a good friend of the show, and we haven't had her on in a while. I think we're overdue to have her back on.
We should.
Especially in light of this announcement, to see if it'll make a difference. All right, let's move on. Our final story today. Y'all remember last year, if you've been listening to the show or are in Singapore, there was a mural of a smoking Samsui woman painted in Chinatown by a wonderful painter, Sean Dunstan. And all of a sudden, it created a big kerfuffle, again, another kerfuffle here, because of the fact that she was seen smoking. Now, these women are epic and historic in Singapore's development. They were the hardest workers, many of them Hakka, I believe, if I'm not getting that wrong. But they were construction women and revered by everybody. They really, in many ways, built earlier Singapore. Okay, so now there's a plaque.
There is a
plaque
plaque
has been installed. An interpretive plaque, they say, bearing an anti-smoking message, because that was the point that was getting a whole bunch of people bummed out. Steve, what do you make of that?
I don't. When you describe, when we go back and forth on WhatsApp and we put a little lead into the segment, you call this one uniquely Singapore.
Uniquely Singapore. Actually, Neil came up with that one.
You have a mural that is the size of a building.
It's great, by the way.
The size of a building. Yeah. You put this tiny little gold plaque towards the bottom, and it has a lot of things on it, and then it ends with the artist stresses that the cigarette depiction is not intended to glamorize or promote tobacco use. Smoking has been shown to be extremely harmful to one's health. Really?
I mean, look, I get the point. We do take our anti-smoking measures very seriously. None of us are being flippant about the dangers of smoking.
No.
But look, when there are giant posters of Thanos, we don't say wiping out half of humanity is not something we support. And if you go and see the Avengers movies, we stress that wiping out the whole of mankind is not something we endorse in Singapore. We can make up our own minds. I don't seriously think a child looking up at a Samsui woman smoking is going to find it glamorous, is going to suddenly say, I need some cigarettes right now. I just don't see it happening.
And these women lived as I read, lived very harsh lives. These
very
were
hard
difficult lives.
Yeah.
They worked incredibly hard and under brutal conditions. Is it glamorous that they were smoking a cigarette? I mean, okay, I get if you have some movie star on the side of the building. Do you want a cigarette in their hands? You don't.
If Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt or somebody is smoking on the side of a building.
Or whoever the kids are looking at today,
right.
I'm sure.
Good point.
No, but this isn't glamorizing smoking.
No.
It's the.
Let me say one thing that I think is good about this, because I don't think it's bad that they put the plaque up. I just don't think it was particularly necessary. But if this now opens the door for other controversial public artworks to be shown, but with an interpretive plaque on it, I think that's a good step forward.
I doubt it.
I'm just saying the door could be open now, right?
By showing what?
Did it for the Samsui woman?
Drug use or
I don't know. I wouldn't even. No, not drug use. I wouldn't even pretend to know what that is. But something that might otherwise be objectionable to society, can you now start putting those public displays up, but with an interpretive plaque?
I would go the other way and say this new round of publicity generates a lot more interest in a magnificent piece of work that celebrates formidable women who played a pivotal role in Singapore's history. If it draws more people to go and see the mural, Fantastic.
And it's the Streisand effect. So you don't want people to see a woman smoking a cigarette. So put up a plaque to have more women see. Put up a plaque to drive more people to see a woman smoking a cigarette. So this is the Streisand effect in absolute.
I tried it. I say, don't read my books. It doesn't make loads of people read my books. I need to work harder on my. I need to work harder on my Streisand effect.
No, what you need to say, reading my books will give you disturbing thoughts, and it will.
Well, that's not untrue.
Whatever you do not read my books.
Steve,
I ask you, I beg you, please don't read my books. It's so bad for you.
Gotta go. Thanks, Steve.
I'll be in Fiji next week, so I'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks' time. All right.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.